Hello, I'm Esther Gidu-Ewart. It's Wednesday, May 24th. This is Africa 54.
Since the outbreak of fighting in Sudan, residents in the capital Khartoum are enduring food shortages, electrical outages, and constant fear. We'll hear more from a Sudanese analyst. Negotiations between the Biden administration and lawmakers in the Republican-controlled House of Representatives over the government's debt limit resumed Wednesday, despite complaints by Republicans about a lack of urgency from the White House. And a South African-based Agritech firm is using artificial intelligence to help farmers grade their produce and target the right buyer. Analysts say introducing AI technologies into agriculture is a game changer. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
Residents in the Sudanese capital reported fighting, including artillery fire Wednesday, the second day of a 7-day ceasefire. Leaders of the Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces had agreed to halt the fighting beginning late Monday, with the possibility of renewing the deal after its initial 7-day period. Previous ceasefires have broken down amid continued violence. The latest agreement came during negotiations in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and included a monitoring mechanism made up of 3 representatives, each from the Saudis, the United States, and the 2 Sudanese forces.
Both parties have been calling on me to condemn the respective other side's actions. I call on both to end the fighting and to return to dialogue in the interest of Sudan and its people.
UN Security Council members echoed support for the new ceasefire and a return to a civilian-led democratic transition. The United Nations estimates that 15 million people needed assistance before the fighting erupted. That has risen to 18 million. Last week, the organization appealed for $2.6 billion to help cope with growing needs. Fighting that broke out in Khartoum on April 15 shows no sign of stopping, and citizens are paying a big price. Residents in the capital city are enduring food shortages, electrical outages, and constant fear. Sidamed Ibrahim has more from Khartoum in this report narrated by Vincent Makori.
Civilians in Khartoum describe brutal conditions in the city as a result of the violence that broke out there in mid-April. Many say they have nearly run out of supplies. Markets are shuttered and imports are no longer entering the country. Yusuf Ahmed is a merchant in the city.
Some people cannot bear this situation, and we ask God for safety. For me, as a grocer, the situation is very bad. There are no goods, and we feel insecure because we could be looted at any moment. Some merchants now store goods in their homes.
According to the United Nations, nearly 19 million Sudanese could suffer from food insecurity due to the conflict. Advocates said $445 million is needed to support refugees fleeing Sudan and to provide aid in the next 6 months.
The situation has deteriorated dramatically and living conditions have become very bad and low. People have begun to store food supplies and most stores are lacking basic necessities. The price of flour is very expensive and the price of bread has doubled. People want to travel outside Khartoum, but tickets are also expensive, whether they are in the States or outside Sudan. This war destroyed many things. We hope things will get better.
In the absence of a functioning government and relief organizations, citizens in some neighborhoods of Khartoum organized voluntary initiatives to help alleviate the crisis for the poorest citizens. Hassan from a neighborhood called Jabra explained how citizen groups are coming together to deal with the impact of the conflict.
We obtained quantities of flour from some agents and distributed it to a large number of poor citizens in the neighborhood and solved the problem of flour shortages. We have some security, economic and health problems. We will form 3 committees concerned with the health situation, the living situation and the security situation. We will work to collect information, and in the same way we address the flour shortage, we will try to provide health and medical services for all patients in the neighborhood by bringing in doctors and medicine. If we are not able, we will offer moral support in these circumstances.
Residents say the situation is getting worse each day. They fear the longer the markets are closed and relief supplies are unable to reach those trapped in the city, the greater the human suffering will be. For Sid Ahmed Ibrahim in Khartoum, Sudan, Vincent Makori, VOA News.
Now, for more on the continuing crisis, I'm joined by Salman, a Sudanese strategic analyst and president of U.S. Educated Sudanese Association. Sama, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther.
Well, you know, your native country has been in some fighting, and we've seen this continued fighting going on despite several ceasefire agreements between the two sides. What do you make of this?
Well, Esther, I mean, there are 3 really key reasons why these 2 generals, General Burhan and Hemeti, continue to fight. One is that they're taking 47 million Sudanese hostage or prisoner in their own country because they want political power over the center of the Sudanese government. 2, economic control. They control vast economic empires. 85% of the Sudanese economy is under their control. So they're looking to retain control of the gold mines, uranium, the diamonds, the livestock, the agriculture, basically Sudan's entire economy. And the third, and one that's really important that I think sometimes goes unnoticed, is that they're fighting to escape accountability. Remember, General Burhan and General Hemeti are both war criminals that have committed atrocities in both the Darfur Civil War, the Darfur Genocide, as well as the South Sudan War. So they're likely to be wanted by the ICC.
You paint a very grim picture, like there's almost no hope for anything here. Do you think the Jeddah mediation talks are going to bear any fruits?
The way they're going, no. But things can change. They can only change if the U.S. and Saudi Arabia work extremely hard to bring together a very broad international coalition to bring this war to an end. And what do I mean by that? You need the UN, you need the US, you need the Gulf states, you need the AU and IGAD and the neighboring countries, and you need the European Union. You need everyone. This has to be non-political. There can't be any motivations or agendas behind this. This has to be about ending the war, and there has to be a strong front around this. And there needs to be arms embargo that's seriously implemented. There needs to be a no-fly zone as well. And there needs to be a freezing of assets so that the smuggled arms don't keep coming into Sudan.
Now, what kind of conversations are you having as Sudanese in the diaspora when you look at the mess that has become Sudan?
We're having different types of conversations every single day, every minute, every hour, Esther. And these conversations are very short term, and they're also medium to long term. On the short term, we're looking at helping our Sudanese who are trapped in their homes with no food, no medicine, no electricity, no water, on the verge of death every single day. So we're looking at immediate humanitarian assistance, and that's based on us gathering funds and sending it over, and sending over help to Sudan, as well as requesting this of the international community. Long term, we are looking for a negotiation process that does not take us back to the same framework agreement. We're looking for a process that takes us to a democratic transition.
Sama, wow, what a country, what a situation. Thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you, Esther.
Salman is a Sudanese strategic analyst and president of U.S. Educated Sudanese Association. The United Nations Children's Fund recently said Sudan's war has displaced at least 450,000 children from their homes, with tens of thousands fleeing into neighboring countries. Aid groups say these refugee children are being deprived of education, without which they are at a higher risk for exploitation, child marriage, and recruitment into armed groups. Henry Wilkins has more on the story from Barota, Chad, near the border with Sudan.
As tens of thousands of refugees arrive across the border from Sudan into Chad, much of the international assistance offered by the UN and aid groups has focused on water, food, and other basic services to refugees. But refugees like 18-year-old Abdul Nasser Mohammed says there is desperate need for education too. His hopes of going to university have been dashed by Sudan's civil war, which started on April 15th, triggering intercommunal violence in his hometown in West Darfur. He had to flee to Chad without his parents.
My mom and dad traveled to Khartoum to get medical treatment. They were stuck there because of the conflict, so they couldn't come with me. It's only me and my siblings.
Mohammed says he has not heard from his parents in weeks and does not know if they're alive or dead. He now lives in this tiny makeshift shelter with his brothers and sisters and says there is no way to take his Sudanese university entrance exams. Malek Mohammed, a teacher who has just fled to Chad from West Darfur, laments the squalid conditions that the children he used to teach are now forced to live in.
All the students, pupils, and teachers from the schools are now here. Here, we don't have the right environment for education, and it's a huge challenge, especially in the long term. If we have to stay for a longer period, there'll be no learning, which causes problems in society later on.
Mohammed says teachers are trying to work out a way for children to take Sudanese exams in Chad. The government in Khartoum has ceased to function since the civil war started, so coordination looks unlikely. Education Cannot Wait, ECW, is the United Nations Fund for Education in Times of Crisis. The organisation's director, Yasmin Sharif, made a visit to Chad in May, pledging $3 million to Chad for educational needs. She was asked why she thinks it's necessary to support education, even when the need for basics like food and water is so high.
Empower them to raise up of the ashes of that suffering. You don't empower them with water and food. These are necessities, but that alone is not going to empower them and prevent them from all the protection challenges, such as gender-based violence, sexual abuse, getting into armed groups, and certainly not giving them any hope for the future.
Sudan's war's impact on children is not confined to education. The UN announced on May 12th that a Sudanese factory producing 60% of specialised food used to treat child malnutrition in the country was destroyed in the fighting.
All of this increases the risk of not being able to reach children in time. If we can't reach children in time, then there's a greatly increased risk of those children dying.
As for Mohammed, he says,
The war has had a huge impact on my plans. All the dreams I've had since my childhood won't be realized.
Tens of thousands of Sudanese children will find themselves in the same situation. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Barota, Chad.
In the eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo, internally displaced persons are a common sight. Their camps are overcrowded and survival is an everyday struggle. But Nwombe Justine uses her entrepreneurship skills to meet the needs of her family. Here's VOA's Pondiho.
It was not the first time, however, when Nwombe Baruta Justine heard gunfire near her home in Rushuru in eastern DRC in July of 2022. She knew she had to run this time around. Grabbing just a few possessions, the 32-year-old set off on foot with her 6 children, walking nearly 43 miles from Rushuru to Kanyaruchinya IDP outside of Goma. For her, this was another close call. She had previously survived a bomb blast thrown on her house in her hometown of Rushuru, but it ripped off her arm.
It was a bomb that fell on my arm and chopped it off in Rushuru.
Nwombe was first displaced nearly 10 years ago when the Tutsi-led M23 seized vast swaths of North Kivu province. Today, she's back in Kanyaruchinya and has set up a small bar in this tent where she sells alcohol.
I sell alcohol, all types of alcohol, the local brew and spirits. I don't make much money, but at least enough to buy food for my kids.
Naombe says that men in the camp often gather around drinking and smoking as they exchange stories. She gets her supply from nearby villages.
My fellow IDPs patronize my bar when one has a little money. He or she treats his friends to a drink because they are all hungry, and that's how we survive.
Despite their limited resources, Naombe has always retained her spirit for entrepreneurship. She has found ways to make the best of what is available to her and turned it into a source of income to sustain her family. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Let us know what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, a South African Agritech firm uses artificial intelligence to help farmers grade their produce and target the right buyers. Stay with us.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we'll look at the role of the African Union in politics on the continent. Also, David Moinina Senge, Sierra Leone's Minister of Basic Education, talks about his new book, Radical Inclusion, and how to create a more just workplace, home and world. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Kigali, we are here for the BAL Finals. For the best of African basketball. The Sahara and Nile Conference delivered their verdict. The top 8 teams on the continent are chasing the Holy Grail. Who will be the next BAL champion? It's game time.
In other news, Namibia has declared an outbreak of Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, CCHF, after one person died of the disease in the capital, Windhoek, according to the government. Laboratory results confirmed the patient had CCHF, which is a tick-borne virus that can also be transmitted between humans through close contact with bodily fluids. South Africa's consumer inflation slowed more than expected in April to an 11-month low of 6.8% in annual terms, according to the National Statistics Agency. Analysts and markets still expect the central bank to hike interest rates on Thursday. A multinational tea company based in Kenya suspended operations after tea plucking and harvesting machines were burned by protesters, citing massive job losses because of mechanization. The suspension of operations at the Ekatera Tea Company's South Rift region firms will affect thousands of employees. Negotiations between the administration of Democratic U.S. President Joe Biden and lawmakers in the Republican-controlled House of Representatives over the government's debt limit will resume Wednesday. The White House on Tuesday continued to insist negotiations with Congress over the raising of the debt ceiling are productive, despite complaints by Republicans about a lack of urgency from the Biden administration. A day after House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and President Joe Biden met at the White House, the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters, quote, "This is urgent, but this is not political. This is about doing the work and the business of the American people."
So we've been very clear, and we've shown urgency from here. And look, we think Republicans saying that the White House is not showing any urgency is a ridiculous question, is a ridiculous statement for them to be making. And so we've been saying this for months. Congress must ask, Congress needs to act, and we'll continue to lay the line on that.
Jean-Pierre's comment follows remarks from top Republican negotiator Representative Patrick McHenry of North Carolina, who said he senses a lack of urgency from the White House to resolve the budget standoff in time to avert a potentially chaotic federal default.
I actually believe at the end of the day we can come to an agreement.
A week to go before a deadline as soon as June 1st, the Democratic president and the Republican speaker are staring down at a financial crisis. Failure to strike a deal would be unprecedented and certain to throw U.S. financial markets into turmoil, inflicting economic pain at home and abroad. Blind and visually impaired people often rely on walking sticks and guide dogs to help them navigate streets and sidewalks, but one Japanese startup is bringing navigation technology directly to their shoes. Tina Trin reports.
For the blind and visually impaired, getting around often means using a guide dog or walking stick. But in Japan, there are helpful clues right beneath your feet. Braille blocks.
It is famous in Japan, so they are everywhere in road in Japan.
These tactile pavement surfaces have spread across the world, guiding users with physical cues they can feel. Japanese startup Ashirasai is taking the idea a step further, bringing the external sensations in.
How to realize braille block inside the shoe. This is our first point.
The Ashirasai in-shoe navigation system guides users with vibrations and motion sensors placed inside their shoes.
There are 3 area vibrator inside the one device, and you need to use both devices on both shoes.
With the smart devices connected to an app via Bluetooth, users enter their destination and a route is mapped out. Motion sensors detect the direction a user is heading in and vibrate on either the left or right foot, indicating which way to go. The speed of vibrations also varies.
The tempo of vibration is corresponding to the distance to the corner. When user approach to the corner, tempo of vibration increases.
The developers say these cues allow blind and visually impaired users to focus on gathering other important information about their surroundings. They say with Ashirasai, directions are one less thing to worry about.
Ashirasai can follow the route so they can focus on the safety.
It's a vision for more freedom and autonomy. Tina Trin, VOA News, Las Vegas.
It's time for our tech segment, and joining us now is our technology reporter, Paul Ndiho. Paul?
Thank you, Esther. A South African-based Agritech farmer, Koronga, uses artificial intelligence to grade farmers' produce, target the right buyers. Analysts say introducing AI technologies into agriculture could be a game changer for Southern African farmers to produce food, optimize crop yields, and reduce wastage. I spoke to Tendai Chitapi, a farmer and co-founder and CEO of Koronga, based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Paul. Lovely to be here.
What does it take for an agri-tech company like Koronga to be one on the cutting edge of using technology in Southern Africa?
It takes a lot of hard work and dedication, obviously. I think we have to realize that the technology sector, and particularly the agri-tech sector, is only starting to pick up now on the continent, So we face, I think, the same, a different set of challenges than maybe more than startups in more established economies, particularly around recognition and obviously access to capital. The resilience and our motivation and our belief in our solution as a game-changing solution is what has really helped us to stay motivated throughout the journey.
Both of you are very, very well versed in other sectors. Why agriculture? A lot of people will be asking the same question. Why venture into these uncharted waters?
Africa, has got, I think, the largest area of arable land in the world. Africa has got a young and growing sort of middle class. The agricultural space is ripe for large-scale investment in terms of helping to drive economic growth in Africa and indeed the world. I think our vision really is that Africa has the potential not only to feed herself, but to be the breadbasket of essentially the whole world. So agriculture just made sense as the space to play in this new wave of technological innovation. Essentially, what we're trying to solve is this idea of market access for smallholder farmers, and how we can use sort of AI and tech to enable that. When I started having these conversations with farmers, it became very clear that there was strong opportunity, and this was a space that was ripe for technological intervention, to help it to sort of leapfrog into the next sort of level. And I think on my personal front, it had such an impact on me that I completely then gave up my corporate endeavors. I persuaded my wife to sort of sell our apartment in the city, and we actually bought a farm. So now I'm also farming full time. And so having made that sort of bold change, it's also helped and given me a new perspective on how we build solutions, because now, I feel like I am a farmer building solutions for farmers. I face the same challenges that they face.
You recently won a prestigious award. What does this mean for you going forward? How do you plan to use this award money?
Congratulations. Right. Okay, thanks. So we were participating in the Milk and Motsepe Prize in Agritech, which was a global competition being run by the Milken Institute in the United States and the Motsepe Foundation in South Africa. Essentially as a way to incentivize and activate, innovators in the agricultural technology space to build and present solutions and ideas that were relevant and highly scalable and could be supported by, the grant funding that was being awarded as prize money in this competition. So out of 3,500, I believe, global registrants, we were selected as one of the top 5 winners. And essentially thank you so much. And so we were awarded $100,000 in prize money for the most creative use of fourth industrial revolution technologies for our Koronga innovation, focused around improving our platform, our user interface, and also around user onboarding, right? I mean, those, I think, are 2 main focal points, the tech development and onboarding customers. This award and this recognition and this accolade has definitely opened up doors with very serious and, I think, interested investors. So I'm quite sure that in the short term, I'll be coming back to share the news that we sort of managed to raise, really funds that can really help us to move forward and grow at scale. The issue of access to markets definitely plays a part in that, and that is the piece of the puzzle that we're trying to solve, because we often hear the fear that I would like to go into agriculture, but I don't know where I'm going to sell my produce when I grow. And that is exactly the problem that Koronga is aiming to solve.
When I grow up, I want to be like you. You've inspired me to become a farmer. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Paul.
That was Tendai Chatapi, co-founder and CEO of Koronga, based in Johannesburg, South Africa. And that's today's Tech Report. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you, Paul. Be sure to join Paul Ndiho every Wednesday for another tech segment right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here